You are listening to Down Home. One of the most powerful voices in 20th century literature and social commentary, James Baldwin spent his life confronting America with its deep contradictions surrounding ethnicity. Born in 1924 in Harlem, New York, Baldwin grew up in poverty, raised by a strict stepfather who was a preacher. As a teenager, Baldwin himself briefly followed the pulpit before turning his attention to writing. By his early 20s, frustrated with racism in the United States, he moved to Paris, where he began producing the essays and novels that would make him one of the most important writers of his generation. Through works like Notes of a Native Son and The Fire Next Time, Baldwin challenged America to reckon with its bigotry, identity, and justice. In this episode, we explore the life of James Baldwin. I'm Derek Wise, and on behalf of Jay Jones, welcome to Down Home, the Canadian experience by two black men.
Breaking new ground, 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 yeah.
All right, so our last few episodes are kind of been leading up to talking about James Baldwin, really. This guy, prolific writer, civil rights activist, but just iconic, right?
Yeah, definitely. I first encountered James Baldwin, I'm going to say high school. I think one of my English teachers got me to read Native Son.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know too much about him other than this book. And I do remember the book specifically. I was like, I'd never sort of read any characters like that before, or kind of the situation, what was going on. Like Bigger Thomas was like one of the first times. I don't know if it was a character I could relate to, but I kind of like, I was like, man, this guy is going through a lot just based on the color of his skin. You know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
and not really knowing at the time in depth about all the civil rights stuff and everything that was going on at the time in the States. I mean, we all knew our icons, but, didn't really know what it was about, but it was, it was a pretty good book anyway. And, one of the biggest things by doing such an iconic person, I was like, obviously we've done all these people that sort of took the leap to go to Paris. And, a lot of it was because of the way they were treated in America and, for being black. And that was sort of the jumping point off for me for James Baldwin. I know all his iconic stories and quotes and poems and different things like that. But I was like, I never really took a deep dive into his actual life growing up. And so there's a lot that shaped and molded him to make him the man that he was.
Yeah.
That was just like one of the first impressions, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But what were some of the things that you found?
Yeah. I didn't know too much about his early life. It is quite interesting. The only thing that I really took out of his early life is that from an early age he read prolifically,
Mm-hmm.
and he was kind of he was encouraged by teachers, and he spent a lot of time in his local library reading.
Yeah, the Harlem Library.
Yeah, exactly. And from that, he actually started trying to process his feelings
Mm-hmm.
about what he was dealing with in a segregated America at the time by putting pen to paper at a very early age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was quite the school that he went to was one of the first schools that actually have a black principal, and a lot of the teachers recognized his brilliance early on, and so he was writing, and by a teenager he was reading like all the works of like some of the greatest intellectuals and authors. He was a big fan of Charles Dickens, But like I was saying, even and like you say, he was processing a lot of feelings of what he was going through. And I was sort of looking at his early life, like, and I was like, oh wow, some of the trauma that people carry, especially in those times. Like
Mm.
his mom was basically was a slave and escaped, came to Harlem during the Great Migration,
Yeah.
and she was only young, like 19 years old.
Yeah.
Um, so and then she married, and then a few years later, or whatever, she met a guy named David Baldwin, who was uh, James Baldwin's step father. He didn't know his father. He was born out of wedlock.
Hmm.
Didn't know his biological father, but David Baldwin was a laborer and a preacher who
Yeah.
was sort of well known, and but they didn't always see eye to eye. They fought quite a bit, like
Yeah.
physical fights,
Yeah. Yeah.
because David Baldwin, in his salvation or his faith, he believed that James was damned because he had white friends and he
Yeah.
liked
Yeah.
books and he liked
Mm.
movies and he liked all these different things. And also, David Baldwin was quite angry. His parents were both born
Yeah.
into enslaved.
Yeah.
He also had a brother who was light skinned, who was fathered by his mother's enslaver.
Mm.
And over the years, he slowly became more angry, and some of the anger went into his sermons and stuff like that. And later on, he was, I think, he had some mental health issues, and he was put in an asylum, and then
Yeah.
eventually died of tuberculosis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was like, man, right there,
Mm.
like all these things that he was feeling. Not only that, was he was sort of he was a gay black man, a black man,
Mm.
and he was viewed as different, and he always thought that he didn't really have an identity growing up.
Mm.
But obviously, he found it through his writings.
Yeah, it's interesting, like having that early part of his life dominated by religion,
Hmm.
and trying to balance that with his love of books,
Yeah.
and you know obviously his identity, the feelings about his identity, his sexual identity at the time as well, and trying to balance that all through that. It's no real surprise that at the age of 24 he took refuge by actually leaving
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
United States. Like we've talked about this the last few
Few episodes.
episodes about how a lot of these notable black figures, they actually had to leave the United States to actually find themselves in almost like he described stepping off of I think it was a boat at the time, and actually literally being able to breathe, even though he had no idea what was going to happen. Like being able
Yes.
to breathe and process, and that's where a lot of his really prolific writing days actually started, was when he was in Paris.
Yeah, he found a lot of solace in there. He
Yeah,
also he also went to another place to find some solace. He also went to Turkey little later on, after he'd been in Paris for a while,
yeah,
uh, and he was sort of going through a lot of different things. Once again, even with his feelings about Paris and being a black man in that time as well, and he one of in one of his books, Giovanni's Room, was also a play on Broadway. So he took shelter, or lived with an actor who had played a character in that play in New York, and he sort of he found a second resurgence of sort of creative output, again doing some plays there, and
hmm,
also a book that he was working on called Another Country.
yeah,
Uh, so yeah.
yeah. Giovanni's Room is actually interesting because like his writings about exploring his sexuality didn't really start until he went to Europe.
Yeah.
So that's when he was able to actually like be his true authentic self.
Hmm.
Was when he was in Europe. Now, not to jump ahead, but Again, like a lot of these figures that we've been looking at, these American figures, he did come back to the States, and it was to take up the fight of social awareness and justice, racial
Hmm.
equality, right?
Yeah.
That happened in like 57, I believe it was,
Hmm.
1957. Um, and it's interesting because as a public figure and he, a proponent of the LGBTQ people,
Hmm.
it was well known that he was a gay man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, figures like Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, and Malcolm X, they embraced him,
Yeah.
which is unusual for the black community at that time, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I read one quote which is quite interesting. So as we know, Martin Luther King didn't take part in the march uh, to Washington, organized in part by Martin Luther King Jr.
Hmm.
But Baldwin was there, but he wasn't invited to speak. And Malcolm X was a friend of Baldwin because again Malcolm X was a prolific reader.
Hmm.
He read everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Baldwin was in the works of James Baldwin was not no exception. But he said to the guy that was interviewing, he said, yeah, yeah, they wouldn't let James go up there because they didn't know what he would say.
Yeah,
Which
it's
is
very
hilarious,
true.
man.
Yeah, yeah. But he was so deep on so many levels. And I
Mm,
mean, obviously, it was his life passion to speak about the plight of the American and, everything that shaped and molded him was about the civil rights movement and
mm,
sort of even sort of like the liberation of gay rights and
yeah,
everything like that. Like he spoke about so many things. And and I find it amazing that, he has stood the test of time even and because even like recently some of his books have been turned into movies, a lot have been turned into plays, so it's really good to see these iconic people other than the Martin Luther Kings and Malcolm X. I mean, James Baldwin is up there, but
mm,
I guarantee you not a lot of people will be like, oh, James Baldwin compared to Malcolm X and Martin Luther
yeah,
King, right?
yeah,
So he was so he just seemed to be the perfect conduit to speak of the times.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And one thing, just before we wrap up, one thing that he did, because he was a very eloquent and for impactful speaker, he also debated,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And he would debate anyone, anywhere, basically. So he actually debated at the time, there was this well-known right wing
Intellectual dude. Yeah.
intellect, yeah, William F. Buckley.
Hmm.
He actually debated Buckley at Cambridge Union. And the question for the debate was, quote unquote, the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro.
Hmm.
So Buckley came out, and it's very much the same right wing argument that's popular today, is that African American communities have the same opportunities as everyone else, and they're taking advantage of these opportunities. There are people that are quite uh, well off, and they're doing just fine, and yada yada. And he actually tried, and this was a mostly white crowd that he was speaking to. So
Hmm.
he tried to hang on to Buckley, tried to hang on to those same tropes by endearing himself to the white crowd. But this is Cambridge is a little bit north,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
didn't really, ingratiate himself to the crowd. And one of the first words that I'll just read the words that
Hmm.
Baldwin said. Some of the first words that he said. In the case of the American Negro, from the moment you are born, every stick and stone, every face is white.
Hmm.
Since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5, 6, 7 to discover that the flag in which you have pledged allegiance along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he went on to say, and he switched up tenses a little bit. I'm speaking very seriously. And he said, and this is not an overstatement. He said, I picked cotton. I carried it to the market. I built railroads under someone else's whip for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So in that kind of had the crowd, he had the crowd at that moment. But the concept of living in a white dominated society, but put so eloquently, without anger and without, King did it in a different way. King was like, oh, let's all come together. And Malcolm X did it in his own way. Let's
exactly.
stick up for
by any means necessary.
By any means necessary. Baldwin did it by, it was like an eloquent expression of white supremacy.
Yeah.
Right.
And he could, it seemed like I said, I think from his background and what molded him and shaped him, I just think he was just so sensitive to it that he just sort of had a great view of what it was, everything that he was feeling, because he had to leave. You know what I mean? Like, imagine the country that you love and respect or whatever, or a country that you're in, you're just not, viewed as a human being. I remember there were sometimes he would walk down, he was walking somewhere and the cops would say to him, why can't you N-word stay uptown where you belong? You know what I mean? So, and that's why it runs so deep, man. Like, and he also had a quote, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. And I was like, man, that is heavy stuff to just be on the cusp of anger. And, a button gets pushed and you might go off a little bit, and then you're viewed as something else, but the anger is totally justified. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's interesting. So
all those concepts kind of go under what he called systems of reality.
Yeah.
It's, and like, it's impactful, right? Like, for him at the time, it spoke to the, for lack of a better word, the intellectual liberal white man.
Yeah.
So they were able to hear his words, embrace it, and see his point of view. And that's probably why he is so beloved amongst the Americans in general that have read his works, right?
Yeah.
Breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking.
You have been listening to Down Home. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
On a high plateau, from the one down below to the future of the funk, getting lost in the flow. Contact with the spark magex. Now it's time to flex with the force from the soul, reaching all aspects, getting deep, no time to sleep. As you reach your next phase, laying it all on the line. New trail start to blaze. It's a fire inside, a brand new path, breaking down the sum to one. Feeling free, I just laugh with the joy of a beat boy.
The song Breaking New Ground from The Breakdown.
Only the seal of perfect blend, like a diamond in the rough, ready to drop a perfect gem. It's time to shine so fine to see what you find. A revolution starts with the